Have you ever reached that silent point where love no longer feels like love, just a beautiful prison you built yourself? That was me, standing in the freezing streets of Copenhagen, realizing I had to walk away from the only person I thought I couldn't live without. But here's the twist, losing them didn't break me. It woke me up. This story isn't just about heartbreak. It's about finding freedom, healing, and even learning English through pain. The cold morning in Copenhagen. The air that morning felt like glass, cold, sharp, and silent. Copenhagen was still half asleep, but my mind was wide awake, spinning between love and loss. I remember standing at the bus stop, my breath turning into tiny clouds, thinking, so this is what it feels like to walk away. Not from a person really, but from a version of myself I no longer wanted to be. For months I had pretended that everything was fine, that love could fix what was already falling apart. But sometimes love doesn't heal. It hides. It covers the cracks until one day, you wake up and realize you don't recognize the face smiling next to you, or the one in the mirror. That morning I couldn't pretend anymore. I still remember the way the city looked. Soft gray skies over the quiet canals, bicycles parked neatly along the frozen streets, and the faint smell of coffee coming from a small bakery nearby. People were rushing to work, wrapped in scarves, but inside me time had stopped. I could almost hear the sound of my own decision, that quiet, trembling yes to freedom. Leaving wasn't brave. It was necessary. My heart didn't feel strong. It felt hollow. But even hollow things can echo truth. I realized that love, when it starts to hurt more than it heals, becomes a lesson, not a home. And maybe the hardest part wasn't losing them. It was learning to live without the us I thought would last forever. As I walked toward the metro, I whispered to myself in English, slowly, softly, "You're doing the right thing." It wasn't perfect grammar. My accent felt heavy, awkward. But that sentence stayed with me like a small light I carried in my pocket. That was the first time I spoke English with emotion, not as a student but as a human trying to survive. Looking back now, that morning didn't break me. It began me. Sometimes you have to lose something precious to remember your own worth. And maybe, just maybe, that's where real learning starts, not in classrooms but in quiet, freezing moments when your heart and mind finally agree to begin again. When love feels like a cage. Have you ever loved someone so much that you started shrinking just to fit inside their world? That was me. At first, love felt like sunlight, warm, alive, full of promise. But slowly, almost without noticing, it became a cage I built with my own hands. Every time I said yes when I wanted to say no, another invisible bar appeared around me. In Denmark, people talk a lot about balance, work-life balance, emotional balance, even coffee-to-milk balance. But love? That's the hardest balance of all. When you care too much, you start losing the rhythm of your own heartbeat. You talk softer, laugh less, and forget the songs you used to sing to yourself. I remember one night sitting by the window watching the snow fall, thinking, how did love turn into loneliness so quietly? Psychologists say the brain doesn't like uncertainty. It would rather stay in pain than face the unknown. That's why people cling to relationships that no longer grow, not because they're happy, but because they're scared of empty space. My brain was doing the same. It whispered, don't leave. You'll regret it. You'll be alone. But another voice, smaller, quieter, more honest, said, you already are. I started reading in English during that time. Not self-help books, but short stories and poems. I needed words that weren't mine, words that could breathe when I couldn't. Every time I learned a new phrase, I felt like I was reclaiming a tiny part of my freedom. To let go. To move on. To begin again. Simple, powerful, terrifying. The truth is, love shouldn't feel like a test you keep failing. It should feel like air, something that helps you live, not something you have to fight to breathe. And when it doesn't, walking away isn't weakness. It's wisdom in disguise. That realization didn't come in one big moment. It came slowly, like dawn light seeping through a half-closed window. The day I decided to leave wasn't the day I stopped loving. It was the day I started remembering who I was before love demanded silence. So yes, when love starts to feel like a cage, maybe it's not the end of a story. Maybe it's the door finally opening. The walk that changed everything. It happened on a quiet Sunday afternoon. The streets of Copenhagen were painted in gold. That kind of soft, Scandinavian sunlight that makes even the air feel gentle. I had no destination. I just walked. Past Nyhavn, where the colorful houses smiled at the water. Past couples holding hands, laughing, unaware that I was quietly unlearning everything I knew about love. Each step felt heavier than the last. But strangely, the world felt lighter. Maybe that's what happens when you stop carrying something invisible, the weight of pretending. I remember the sound of my boots on the cobblestone, the crisp wind against my cheeks, and a sudden thought that froze me mid-step. What if freedom doesn't begin when you leave someone, but when you stop needing them to make you feel whole? For years, I thought happiness had to be shared to be real. I waited for someone to make me feel seen, valued enough. But that walk taught me something else. You can walk alone and still feel surrounded by love. The city became my companion. The sound of bicycles became a song. Even the language, Danish, so foreign, so impossible, sounded like gentle background music to my new beginning. Science says walking clears your mind because it activates both sides of your brain. Maybe that's why each step I took felt like untangling a knot. Thoughts that once hurt began to make sense. Memories that once burned began to soften. I wasn't walking away from love anymore. I was walking toward clarity. At some point, I stopped by the water and whispered to my reflection in English, "You're going to be okay." Simple words. Slow, soft, but real. That sentence became a rhythm, a mantra, something I repeated like breathing. And for the first time in a long while, I believed it. There's something magical about walking with no plan. You don't realize where you're going until you look back and see how far you've come. That day, I didn't find freedom in distance. I found it in presence, in being fully there, step by step, thought by thought. So if you ever feel lost, don't run. Walk. Slowly. Through your fear, through your confusion, through your heartbreak. Because sometimes the only way to heal is to keep moving, not away but forward. Silence speaks louder than words. Silence used to scare me. When someone stopped talking, I filled the space with noise, excuses, explanations, anything to keep the quiet away. But in Denmark, silence is part of the culture. People don't rush to fill every pause. They let moments breathe. At first, it felt uncomfortable, almost painful. But slowly, I began to understand. Silence isn't the absence of meaning. It's where meaning begins. After the breakup, my apartment felt too still. No background laughter, no clinking cups. No late-night conversations that went nowhere. Just the hum of the radiator and the sound of my own heartbeat. It was strange. Yet in that emptiness I heard something new, my own thoughts, my own voice. The one I had been ignoring for years. One night, I sat by the window with a cup of tea, staring at the flickering lights across the canal. I didn't say a word, but inside I was having the most honest conversation I'd ever had. It went something like this. Why did you stay so long? Because I was afraid. Afraid of what? Of being alone. And then the answer that changed everything. But you already were. Psychologists call this emotional clarity. The ability to understand what you feel without running from it. The brain, when quiet, starts connecting you didn't even know existed. And the more you sit with silence, the more it teaches you to listen. Not to others, but to yourself. That's also how I started improving my English. I began reading out loud slowly, clearly. Then I'd pause, let the silence stretch, and listen to my own pronunciation. Felt awkward at first, but it worked. Every pause became a small teacher. I realized silence wasn't empty after all. It was full of feedback, full of growth. Denmark taught me that silence can be soft, not scary. It can hold you when words fail. And sometimes the quiet moments, the ones without background music or conversation, are where healing begins. So now, whenever life feels too loud, I don't fight the silence. I invite it in. Because sometimes silence says what love never could. Learning English through heartbreak. It's funny. I didn't start learning English because I wanted a better job or to travel more. I started because my heart needed a new language to breathe in. After the breakup, every word in my mother tongue felt too heavy, too full of memory. But English, it felt distant, light, almost like a safe place to rebuild myself. I remember sitting in a small cafe near Norrport station, a notebook open, headphones in. I was listening to slow English podcasts, voices calm, steady, gentle. At first, I barely understood half of what they said. But instead of feeling frustrated, I felt comforted. Their rhythm became my therapy. Each word landed softly, like footsteps leading me somewhere new. When you're heartbroken, your brain works differently. Neurologists say the areas linked to physical pain light up the same way as when you experience emotional loss. That means heartbreak literally hurts. But here's the strange beauty. Learning something new like a language can help your brain heal by forming new connections. Every new word, every phrase is like a stitch mending a wound that I began speaking to myself in English, while cooking, walking, even crying. It's okay. You're learning. Keep going. Simple sentences, but they carried strength. It wasn't about grammar anymore. It was about rhythm, breath, honesty. English became my way of starting over. I made a rule. No translating, no perfection. Just flow. I'd read out loud, record my voice, then play it back. It was awkward at first, like hearing a stranger inside me. But over time, that voice grew steadier, more confident, more me. Sometimes I'd stand by the sea in Amager Strand Park, letting the wind mix with my words. I'd say something like, "I'm healing," or "I'm free," and it felt powerful, like I was declaring it to the world. Even if no one was listening, learning English didn't just improve my communication. It reshaped my identity. It taught me that language is emotion, that words can carry pain and still sound beautiful as so. If you're going through heartbreak, try speaking your feelings in another language. Not to escape them, but to transform them. Because sometimes a new language isn't just a skill. It's a second chance to tell your story differently. Denmark taught me slow living. Denmark moves at a different rhythm. Life here doesn't shout, it hums. People walk slowly, eat slowly, even talk slowly. At first, I thought it was just the cold weather making everyone move like honey in winter. But soon I realized it was something deeper. A quiet philosophy the Danes live by. Lev livet langsomt. Live life slowly. When my heart was still healing, this pace saved me. In other countries, people might say, move on. But in Denmark, no one rushed me. My Danish friends didn't try to fix me or drown me in advice. They simply sat with me, in silence, with candles glowing and soft music playing in the background. That's when I discovered hygge, the Danish word for cozy comfort, for being present in small warm moments. Every morning I'd sit by the window with my coffee, just watching the snow fall. No phone. No noise. Just stillness. Felt strange at first, like doing nothing, but slowly it became everything. I started hearing the world again, the sound of birds, the kettle boiling, my own breath. It was as if my life had been on fast forward for years, and finally someone pressed pause. Science actually supports this way of living. When you slow down, your nervous system resets. Your cortisol, the stress hormone, drops. Your brain starts noticing details it normally skips over. It's like switching from blurry vision to high definition. That's how I began practicing English too slower. I stopped rushing through words. I listened to my own pronunciation. I enjoyed the melody of the sentences. I discovered that fluency isn't speed, it's clarity. The slower I spoke, the more confident I became. One evening, walking along the lakes in Copenhagen, I saw the sunset reflecting on the water like melted gold. And for the first time in months, I felt peace, not excitement, not passion, just peace. That's when I understood what Denmark had been teaching me all along. You don't have to chase life. If you slow down enough, it will come to you. So now, whenever things feel chaotic, I remind myself, breathe, sip your coffee, light a candle, and speak slowly. Healing, like language learning, takes time, but every slow step counts. The science of letting go. Letting go sounds poetic until you actually try to do it. Then it feels like tearing off your own skin. Your brain hates loss. It's wired to resist change, even when that change is good for you. Neuroscientists say that when you lose someone you love, your brain still expects their presence, their voice, their touch, even their text messages. That's why heartbreak feels like confusion. Your mind keeps looking for someone who no longer exists in your life. For a long time I fought that feeling. I told myself, I'm fine. But my body knew I wasn't. I couldn't sleep. I'd wake up with that heavy emptiness pressing against my chest. One night, while scrolling aimlessly through my phone, I came across a quote in English. Letting go is not losing love. It's trusting that life still has more to give. I read it again and again until it sank in. Something inside me shifted. I realized I didn't need to erase the past. I just needed to stop living inside it. So I started small. Each day I did one thing differently, changed my route to work, ordered a new kind of coffee, learned one new English word. tiny rewires. And slowly my brain began to understand. We're safe now. We can move on. Psychologists call this neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reprogram itself. Every time you try something new, you're teaching your mind that the world doesn't end when things change. That's what letting go really is, not forgetting but updating your emotional software. And as strange as it sounds, learning English became my therapy. Every new phrase I learned, I'm healing, it's okay, I'm ready, was like replacing old memories with new possibilities. My accent didn't matter, my effort did. The more I spoke, the more I felt free. One afternoon, I went back to the harbor where I had once cried. Same spot, same cold wind, but this time I felt different. Lighter. The pain hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed. It no longer owned me. I looked at the sky and whispered in English, "Thank you for leaving. You taught me how to stay." That's the strange science of letting go. It doesn't erase your story. It simply edits the ending. Freedom begins with listening. Freedom doesn't always start with running away. Sometimes it begins when you stop running, when you sit still long enough to hear what your heart has been trying to tell you. For me, that's what happened in Denmark. After months of silence, heartbreak, slow mornings, and quiet walks, I finally learned how to listen, truly listen. Not just to people, to life, to myself. One evening, I sat on a bench by Cern, the lakes in Copenhagen, watching the reflections of the city lights dance on the water. I closed my eyes and listened, the wind brushing through the trees, the laughter of strangers, the distant hum of bicycles on the cobblestone streets. And then beneath it all, a smaller sound, my own breathing. Calm, steady, free. That's when I understood. Freedom doesn't come from leaving something behind. It comes from being present, from hearing your own voice and trusting it again. In love, in learning, in life. It reminded me of how I practiced English. In the beginning, I tried to speak perfectly. I wanted to sound fluent, confident, native. But over time, I realized real fluency isn't about sounding like someone else. It's about listening deeply enough to express your own truth. Every word you say carries who you are. That's why when you speak slowly, clearly, honestly, you're not just training your mouth, you're training your soul. Now I see love and language as the same journey. You listen, you misunderstand, you try again. Sometimes you break. Sometimes you rebuild. But if you keep listening with kindness, with patience, you grow. So if you're listening to this right now, maybe your heart is tired. Maybe you're standing at your own emotional border, unsure whether to stay or walk away. My advice? Don't rush. Don't panic. Just listen to your breath, your body, your voice. Because somewhere inside that quiet, the answer you've been chasing is already waiting for you. And when you find it, that gentle, honest sound that says, "I'm okay now," that's not the end of love. That's the beginning of freedom.